Okay, I think we can start. It's quite a big topic and we have quite a big audience for today. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the Work Plus live session. It's an opportunity to interact and hear from the 2021 Best Places to Work companies. My name is Rinka Lavrencic. I'm the CEO of Work Plus, and I will be your host for today. Before we begin, I would like us all to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we find ourselves on today. I'm in the Work Plus office, and I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which each and every one of you are living, working, and learning from today. As we share our knowledge, may we also respect their elders, past, present, and emerging. With Work Plus Live, we are trying something new. This is our third session. Generally, pre-COVID times, we would host a conference once a year to learn from the best. Unfortunately, that's not possible at the moment. And I think monthly webinars are a nicer, smaller chunks opportunity to learn about certain topics and get a wider audience to engage with us. So as it is our third session, we're still trying to learn how technology works after 2 years, how to run a webinar when everyone's working from home and so on. So please be patient. We'd love for this to be interactive. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the group chat. But you can also raise your hand if you would like to ask your question live. We can enable your camera and your microphone, and you can do that. The topic for today is diversity and inclusion at the best. We chose this topic because it's February. A lot of companies are thinking about how they will recognise the International Women's Day in March next month, and it tends to be a kickoff of the calendar of events that happen around diversity and inclusion. For many organisations, it is the only event that happens in the year in terms of diversity and inclusion. Perhaps gender diversity is an easier topic to cover than the rest, but we're hoping to today cover quite a large variety of diversity and inclusion programs for your organisation to consider implementing and the benefits of them. Today, I have a couple of speakers joining me from the best organisations. We have Sally Pritchard, Chief People Officer at Nous Group. We have Stacey Zanakis, Director, HR and Organisational Development at Export Finance. We have Christy Moses, Customer Director at 6 Degrees Executive Recruitment. And unfortunately, Caroline Atia from Coloplast was called away into a meeting at the last minute, but she has provided Sarah Brentnell from Work Plus her script and her blessing to represent Coloplast in today's session. So thank you all for joining me today. So diversity and inclusion and belonging, why are we focusing on this in organisations? Well, Australia's workforce is constantly changing and is preparing for and responding to economic, environmental and social factors. Our population is ageing and people are staying in the workplace for longer. Many industries are experiencing significant skills and labour shortages, especially in the growth areas. Increasingly, employers need to consider how they will access a diverse range of skilled and talented people and to take advantage of Australia's untapped workforce to meet their business needs. Attraction and retention has been an issue for organisations in Australia for at least the last decade and a half since I have been working in this field. The last 2 years most definitely haven't helped that situation. So to start off with some definitions of what diversity, inclusion and belonging, which you might have seen in a lot of literature lately in this topic about. So diversity is a collective mixture of differences and similarities for both individuals and organisations and characterised by values, beliefs, experiences, backgrounds, preferences and behaviours. We also split diversity into visible diversity traits and they're factors such as race, gender, physical ability and age, and invisible diversity traits, including sexual orientation, religion, socioeconomic status, education, parental status, amongst others. Inclusion is the achievement of a work environment in which all individuals are treated fairly and respectfully and have equal access to opportunities and resources. Belonging is that feeling of security and support where there is a sense of acceptance And inclusion and identity for a member of a certain group. It is when an individual can feel that they can truly bring their authentic self to the workplace. So another way of looking at diversity, inclusion and belonging is think about diversity as being invited to the party, inclusion being asked to dance, and belonging feeling like you can dance like nobody is watching. Organisations employ diversity strategies, have seen many benefits come out of that. So diversity does tend to lead to innovation in organisations because employees feel like they are empowered to take calculated risks. And in order to be successful in this hyper-competitive world, we do need employees to feel comfortable to take calculated risks. Employees with different lifestyles and different backgrounds do challenge each other more. And diversity does create a dissent. And this dynamic of dissent prevents organisations from becoming insular. It leads to inquiry and breakthroughs. And as a result, working teams that are diverse tend to come up with a wider range of solutions to business problems. Diversity and inclusion programs lead to employee engagement by allowing employees to bring different ideas, suggestions, and solutions to the workplace. It leads to an ability to attract the best talent, so widening the talent pool and increases your chances of not only finding the best hires. Additionally, as we will hear from Christy, a lot of potential employees now are asking about diversity and inclusion programs at organisations and using that as an assessment criteria. And it definitely affects employee retention because these organisations tend to be far more inclusive and they understand the needs of the different employees that they have. They make people feel valued and respected and make everyone feel like they have a seat at the table. And productivity. So many studies on this. So there is a study by McKinsey that shows the return on equity is 53% higher for organisations that have diverse leadership teams, EBIT margins 14% higher. BCG did a study within organisations and assessed diversity amongst different teams and found teams that were diverse were 13%, had a 13% increase in revenue compared to teams in the organisation that were less diverse. Deloitte found that diverse companies enjoy a 2.3 times higher cash flow per employee. So there are many benefits to having diversity and inclusion programs in the organisation. As I mentioned, one of the benefits is attracting the best talent. And one of our speakers for today is Christy Moses from 6 Degrees Executive, to give us a perspective on candidates when they do come to 6 Degrees and the sort of questions that they're asking. So thank you so much for joining us today, Christy. So what are candidates asking your recruitment specialists when they are looking for new jobs and when it comes to diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate here today. At 6 Degrees, we are really passionate about D&I, and it is something that is becoming more and more topical and across all those different pillars of D&I that you just described. So as recruiters, we have some really fascinating insights because candidates, they don't just tell us what they're looking for in a future organization, but they tell us pretty specifically what they might not be happy with or why they are looking to leave their current organization. And more, particularly as we move beyond this COVID period where a lot of individuals have had more time for reflection and think about, personal values and priorities, we're seeing themes related to, company culture, purpose, values, working conditions, flexibility, becoming more and more topical. And the theme of D&I is really interwoven into quite a few of those areas. The most obvious example, and one there that we are seeing with nearly every candidate, and it's mentioned in nearly every process right now. So one that I would also really recommend for those on the call to really think about and prioritize is on the theme of workplace flexibility. Workplace flexibility traditionally was very much focused as a kind of a lever or benefit, but very much really utilized and I guess sold to primarily women children, and I think, you know, mainly focused on when the kind of the challenge of women in leadership was becoming more topical in Australia. So we've been moving beyond it being just about women with kids pre-COVID, but quite slowly. I think the COVID time has really accelerated that, and it's kind of opened up everyone's eyes and said, well, actually, workplace flexibility should be for everyone, and flexibility means different things for different people. For, you know, younger generations, it might mean more time with friends, holidays, more time for sports. You know, for those with kids, it is still very much around family time. You know, and others it might be around personal interest. Everyone's different, and it's really understanding, you know, those, I guess, benefits, but really should just be part of workplace culture. And it's about how you, you know, intertwine that into your business to not exclude anyone that may want flexibility. And I think just another thing is just candidates are asking, they're wanting to know more granular detail. So they might look on a company's website and say, you know, here are our values, here's our diversity and inclusion statement. But candidates are saying, well, what do they actually do? Can you provide me with some examples? And that's really, really important. So it's around that assessment of, you know, the company, maybe it's the company says this, but can you show me the examples? I want to understand more. And we're definitely receiving more detail around those questions now than we probably ever have in the past.
That's really interesting. So do you find that candidates are asking more about proof to show that organisations are demonstrating that they do live their values and do drive a diverse and inclusive culture?
Yeah, absolutely. So candidates really want to know what organisational makeup looks like overall. So, you know, I think there's been a lot of focus at the board level, at the ELT level. We want to show, you know, maybe a gender split or maybe a bit of culture diversity within our executive team, so we can post that in our board pack or on our website. But candidates now want to know, well, who will I be surrounded with day to day? Who will be in my team? Who is in the office? What does that mix look like? And we're getting more questions around what you just talked about in the definitions, but I guess that difference between seen and unseen. What other, you know, types of people are in the business? And, you know, so questions around cultural background, previous industries and work experiences, that's probably another area. So a lot of candidates are also probably shying away from businesses that they feel just recruit the same type of people. So, oh, they always hire people from these types of backgrounds or these types of companies. And actually, I've come from that background and I don't want to be surrounded. Like, the reason I'm leaving is for a change. So I don't want to go somewhere where it will be a bit the same. So, you know, I guess anything that can be brought to life to candidates around how an organization is being proactive to diversify the workforce and teams, the better, because really, and particularly then when candidates go to an interview, even if they're kind of sold the dream and, you know, we can tell them everything, but if they go to an interview and they're kind of greeted with a very sameness approach, you know, particularly those candidates who are seeking something different, which also post-COVID more candidates are, that's probably what is, you know, not exciting them as much as when they see more points of difference. And once again, that can mean different things to different people, but it's about thinking about how, you know, organizations can look to present that in a more varied way. And probably the other thing is, I mean, candidates don't necessarily expect organizations to have mastered everything. Like, there's not an expectation that everything will be perfect. I think they just want to see that there is true positive intent and not just, you know, a statement on a website. And I think the other thing to be aware of is consistency in message. So where we see challenges, or, you know, particularly at the moment, maybe where organizations fall down, is where there's a really positive message at a HR level, at an organizational level, but someone then goes to an interview, you know, with middle management or a specialist team member, and they're asked a question around the D&I strategy, and that individual kind of has no idea, it's clear they're not interested, or it's not really ingrained in the business, that's definitely alarm bells for candidates. Like, the consistency across a business is also really important.
And have you noticed changes in the words used in recruitment advertising and job advertising to ensure there is a little bit more of a diversity and unconscious bias theme put through it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is very much, in the spotlight now. So we're definitely seeing an increase in D&I statements on job ads, as well as more specific call outs for candidates from marginalized groups to be encouraged to apply. Advice for those who require assistance in the interview process is also becoming more common, but I would note that an organization really needs to have processes in place to manage those candidates that require assistance, or an understanding of what that assistance looks like before going out and putting those broad statements out there, because once again, it's a kind of expectation versus reality, and if it's done the wrong way, often that can cause a bit more harm than good. But moving in that direction is really positive, and it sends a positive message really to anyone who would look at that job ad, that this organization is being proactive around D&I. And also in the current talent market, I mean, it's very, very tight across a lot of job categories. So, the war for talent, the great resignation, it's highly topical at the moment. I mean, here at 6 Degrees, we're really, really encouraging our clients to try and move away from these big long lists of must-have criteria, years of experience, really narrow thinking around previous industries and role types, because that does just create that sameness in a way, and really think about, well, who out there could do this job? Are there other industries? Are there other backgrounds? Are there other types of people that could be similar? How could we maybe upskill them, train them, and offer something different to the business? How do we attract these different groups of people to help solve the talent challenge? And how do we rewrite our advertising to be more open and encouraging to a greater pool of applicants that we then can choose from? And ultimately, by doing that, we're also naturally bringing in more variety in terms of the types of people, background, skill set, etc., that we're hiring, which in itself will help contribute to that the overall D&I journey as overall workforce shifts and grows.
No, that's excellent. Thank you so much for your insights on that. So as Christy mentioned, there is sometimes a bit of a disconnect between the intent and practice of diversity and inclusion. So what are some of the things that the best organisations are doing to keep diversity and inclusion alive? So one of the first things you need to do is you need to assess the current state of diversity and inclusion in your workplace. Think about how many people from underrepresented groups your organisation attracts, hires, promotes. Have a look at how this changes over time. How is this different from different locations? How is it different in different roles and different levels through your organisation? And also have a look at how programs have a positive impact on this, because different things will work in different parts of your organisation. As Christy touched on, inclusive language has been one of those really big changes in organisations, thinking about changing how we address things, changing how we address people, groups, and so on. As an example, looking at bias in advertising language. So there's been some research to say that there are masculine words in job ads, such as dominant and challenging, which tend to be quite discouraging to women and members of the LGBTQI community in applying for roles. So, thinking about using words such as flexibility, support, tends to be a lot more inclusive. Also, looking at everyday terms we use when we communicate with teams, saying things like, hey guys, can be quite exclusive to younger generations, female employees, non-binary employees, and so on. And also other common terms we might use, like describing the last quarter as being awfully good, can actually be really confusing to your neurodivergent employees. So employees that might be on the spectrum for autism and alike. might find that type of communication quite confusing. So another thing that organisations are doing is challenging unconscious bias by conducting training, not only for management, but for the whole team, helping them become a little bit more aware and understand their own biases and how to best manage them and how to address them. Educating leadership, in most organisations, especially in the tech space, which is one of our biggest growth areas in Australia, senior leadership tends to be white males. There's a very little diversity there. So we need to address it at senior leadership level. It needs to be a top-down approach. And when it is a top-down approach, it can be implemented company-wide. We need to educate senior leaders on why diversity is important and how to grow that pipeline. Mentoring programs. So again, a lot of research out there showing that individuals from underrepresented groups don't feel like they have a chance to grow in organisations, and having mentors can definitely help overcome those challenges. It's also a great thing to talk about when you are looking at attracting talent into your organisation. Celebrating cultural events that might be celebrated by the current team members you have, that might be celebrated by future teams that you would like to invite into your organisation. If you go to the WRK+ website, there is a calendar. We have collated pretty much everything we could find to put in there about the different cultural events that happen throughout the year in Australia and how your organisation might look at implementing them. Diversity training, so great opportunity to give your team members diversity training, make them aware of the diversity that already exists in the organisation, make them aware of the diversity that could exist in the organisation. This also helps not only foster more inclusive, diversive strategies, but helps people think in different ways as well, how they might act in the organisation as well. Assessing your organisation's values, so ensuring that all employees have a responsibility to always treat others with dignity and respect, and also ensure that the values are expecting employees to exhibit and exhibit conduct that reflects inclusion during work, at work functions, and offsite at other work events. And of course, measuring employee feedback. Good engagement surveys are instrumental in measuring your employees' needs and identifying the gaps and variances in the employee experience, recognising their individual experiences within groups and referring to the data that you collect there. So as I mentioned at the beginning, unfortunately, Caroline had to pull out at the last minute for this webinar. However, Sarah Brentnell, my colleague and one of the members of our assessment team, has been given Caroline's blessing and her script to represent Coloplast today. So thank you so much, Sarah, for stepping in at the last minute. Sarah, at Coloplast, they do consider diversity and inclusion at all stages of the people cycle, from how they attract and recruit employees all the way through to how they run performance reviews and succession plans. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So at Coloplast, ensuring a diverse and inclusive culture really starts at the recruitment stage of the people cycle. So the concept of unconscious bias underpins all their decisions, particularly when it comes to recruitment. So for every role Coloplast recruits, they start by defining their needs, ideal candidate skills and competencies to match. So further to this, Coloplast now add questions such as, does this role suit an intern, recent graduate? Does this role suit someone returning to the workforce after a long-term absence? So this has created some really great conversation with hiring managers and HR in defining their needs and looking at how they can intentionally increase their focus on diversity and inclusion. Coloplast have recently filled 3 brand new roles within their consumer care team. 2 out of those 3 successful candidates are mums who have been away caring for their family. 1 had been away for 3 years and the second had been away for 4.5. In their efforts to ensure that they create a diverse and inclusive culture, Coloplast have partnered with an organisation called Premium Graduate Placements. So this organisation represents recent graduates who have found it really challenging to locate work due to either having completed their qualifications experience overseas or have no local experience. So a recent example there was they had an IT officer role that they advertised last year, and instead of going to market, they went direct to the PGP, who paired them up with a suitable intern. So they're now finished their internship and are permanent. So it just gives you another insight into how they can try and capture this sort of graduates and creating more of a diverse workplace. Coloplast have also been reviewing how they advertise for roles, which comes into some of what Christy was mentioning, and they're looking at how they can communicate within their ads. For example, specific roles would suit someone looking for a return to the workplace. So how do they communicate that and aware of the unconscious bias? So this is a great outcome because they put up an ad. They got over 200 applications for a role that required someone to come on board that had been absent from the workplace. Finally this year, as part of Coloplast's recruitment strategy, they're looking at targeting candidates with a disability. So they're being intentional in partnering with associations that can support with this transition. So as Coloplast is a medical device organisation, they're looking at reaching out to the end users who use their products and engage with them for recruitment opportunities to, again, further diversify and increase their inclusivity in their teams.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And another great strategy by an organisation looking at their end users and seeing how they can bring them back into the workforce and represent their organisation. Actually, forgot to mention at the start that we have a paper coming out about all of this because it's such a large topic. There's so much to cover, and we definitely want to include some of the great insights that have come out of this session. So we will send that to all the attendees next week. So some of the emerging diversity and inclusion programs at the best organisations that we found. So programs around including more employees with disabilities, and we'll hear from Sally at NOUS a little bit more about what they are doing there. Indigenous employment strategies, Stacey's going to talk about that in a little while. Organisations are looking at how to be more culturally diverse, more linguistically diverse, looking at employees from the LGBTQIA+ community, looking at bringing mature-aged employees into the workforce and into their organisation, women in leadership programs, family and marital status programs in the workplace as well to bring more diversity that way. And also we're seeing quite a large rise in media and in articles published around employees with neurodivergent features. So thinking about employees that might be autistic or on the spectrum or have other neurological differences. What does it mean to have these employees in your organisation, and how do we support them? Likely you do have quite a diverse workplace. You know, when you start looking at it and start measuring it, you already do have a diverse workplace. Why these strategies and policies are important is to help you manage them, to help you support them, and to help you retain them for longer at your organisations. So for the remainder of the session, I would like us to talk about two particular diversity strategies that we don't often get to hear a lot about, but some great things are happening at the best organisations. And the first one being the Indigenous employment strategy. The Australian Department of Education, Skills and Employment states that STEM, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, jobs have the highest employment and the highest jobs growth in the Australian workforce at the moment. Yet today, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people remain exceedingly underrepresented in these industries. And, you know, this begins at early stages. We know that only 43% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children graduate high school with just one STEM subject. There are literacy and numeracy gaps, along with other systematic factors, which all lead to a lack of opportunity for economic participation within the First Nations people. Australian organisations need to hold themselves accountable to their commitments and have towards a fair and equal workplace, and one that recognises and incorporates fair representation of the traditional custodians on the lands that we work from. Indigenous Australians represent 2% of our working population, and organisations should work towards having that reflected in their organisations as well. So one of the organisations that can definitely assist you with this is Reconciliation Australia. They are an independent, non-for-profit organisation, the lead body for reconciliation in Australia. They promote and facilitate reconciliation by building relationship, respect and trust with the wider Australian community and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So Stacey, at Export Finance, you have been building partnerships with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait communities in order to lead to a more positive outcome through relationship, respect and opportunities. Can you share with us how this has developed, the relationships your organisation has?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me today, Zrinka. It's a pleasure. I guess when I think about it, it was really the development of our Innovate RAP, so our Reconciliation Action Plan, that helped us think about the right partnerships at the right time for us at Export Finance Australia. And for those who are unaware, RAP obviously gives you that guidance and that framework to better understand how to best cultivate those relationships. So for us, what really happened was we were able to identify how we can add most value in the Indigenous community, but inversely, which partners would be best to help us in achieving our reconciliation goals. So the RAP really paved the way in not only building those existing relationships that we had for a little while, but also helping us identify how to cultivate new relationships, particularly in areas such as cultural capability and learning, procurement, mentoring, community programs, and so on. But one particular area I'll draw out is that of partnerships that are meaningful in the context of our core business, which is export finance. So what we try to do is really expand our network as we looked for more opportunities to provide potential export financing solutions to Indigenous businesses. And our partnerships grew, particularly with Ignite. So that's the Indigenous Network for Investment, Trade and Export, and the NIAA, which is the National Indigenous Australians Agency, as well as DFAT and Austrade, who we have long-standing relationships with. And so they all really helped us work, or continue to help us work towards this outcome. And we just continue to seek counsel and keep that dialogue alive and ongoing. Now, I guess whilst the RAP does provide you with that framework and that guidance in respect to developing partnerships, at the end of the day, it's really our people that bring these partnerships to life. And it's their passion and their dedication that translate whatever actions are on a page to real substantial outcomes. And personally, what I see our people doing is looking for opportunities to connect and to partner in a real way with Indigenous organisations rather than treat it as a tick the box exercise. And funnily enough, it's this commitment that has enabled us to deliver on over 2/3 of our RAP actions in total in the first year of the RAP's 2-year lifespan, which is a great achievement. So I guess what's been the impact for us? Well, these growing relationships have had a positive effect on both our business and our people, where they've really opened up new horizons for us, and they've really expanded our thinking in terms of, what's possible. And I can confidently say that, we doubled the number of Indigenous partnerships from one financial year to the next. So we're obviously doing something right. So we are excited for the year ahead and continuing on this trajectory. And, I think that will just lead to even further sort of positive outcomes in 2022.
Yeah, I think your achievement of finalising 2/3 of the plan in the first year is definitely down to the level of involvement and engagement you had with the rest of the export finance team. So congratulations on that, and wish you all the success in that program, and looking forward to hearing about more that is happening in that space at Export Finance. Another area of diversity we don't tend to hear a lot is about ability and disability in workplaces, and what are even your options as an employer and the support that is there. There's actually quite a lot of support. From ABS, the Bureau of Statistics, we know that only 27.2% of people with disabilities are participating in the workplace. And in a vast majority of cases, people with disabilities are able to work and they want to find a job. They simply need to be given a chance and they need to be given visibility. Now, over the last 2 years, there has been an increase in participation from disabled potential employees, as working from home has definitely provided an opportunity to do that and to demonstrate that they can work just as well as an able-bodied employee. People with disabilities are often categorised by a high degree of dedication and commitment to their role. Employers can access valuable employees who are reliable, skilled, and have a great attitude and a desire to work when they are employed, when they employ people with disabilities. Now, Sally, at NOUS, you do a lot of work with the Australian Network on Disability. Are you able to tell us a little bit about that relationship and how it has contributed to promoting diversity and inclusion at NOUS Group?
Yeah, I'd love to, Zrinka, and like everyone else here, I'm, very pleased to be here today to talk about this conversation or talk about this topic. I think it's really important. I've been taking some notes because I also think it's a great opportunity to learn from others. And I would say that I am by no means an expert on disability and diversity. I think I'm increasingly learning. I think NOUS is increasing our awareness and improving in this space. But, we've been doing some things for a number of years and is a part of that. So we became an AND member back in 2018. And the initial driver of that was to gain access to a wider candidate pool. So we were specifically looking to engage interns. We are a consulting company. We bring a lot of interns in to give them an opportunity to see what it's like to work in a consulting firm, and for us to sort of get an opportunity to see how they would succeed or otherwise in that environment. So that was the initial driver. In 2018, we engaged with AND. We became a member, but we also became part of their intern program. So I think we sourced, from memory, around about 4 interns across different offices, and then we drew on the network and Australian Network on Disability. We drew on them to kind of help us understand the conversations that we should have, the workplace adjustments that we would need to make, and sort of really how to engage in that whole conversation, how to create an environment and what we would need to put in place at our end to make sure that those interns could work productively and effectively with us. And then we didn't engage with AND much over the last couple of years, probably not surprising to anyone that there was a lot of other things going on. And I think it's fair to say we sort of just that relationship was sort of put to one side, and we picked it up again fairly recently, where we started thinking, actually, disability is an area that we could be better represented at NOUS. We've got, of the people who've disclosed their sort of status around diversity data, we've got about 15 people so far who've told us they've got a disability. I think the number is higher than that, but that's the number that have disclosed that data. So for us, it's probably an area where we think we could do better. We could hire more people with a disability. So we've reinvigorated that relationship with AND we're just starting to explore now the resources that they've got available on their member portal, looking at things like workplace adjustment statements. NOUS is a very flexible organisation. We do make individual workplace adjustments, but we just haven't done a very good job of telling people that we do that, or making it easy for people to know how to have that conversation when they first join us. So we're starting to do some work now around making sure that everyone knows that workplace adjustments are reasonable, and we're very easily able to engage in that conversation, but who should they talk to, and make it easy for people to have that. I think talking to AND the other day, they said to me, some of their research shows that you have to ask the question about 3 times of people to say, is there any adjustment that you would need? Is there anything that we can do to help you adjust? And you ask it again, and finally on the third time of asking the question, you might start to get some, information from people to say, well, actually, now that you mention it, this would be really helpful. So we're starting to kind of get some support on that. And the relationship manager for us at AND is also connecting the sponsor of our employee network that's newly formed. So we've got a group of nurses who are pulling together a disability and wellbeing employee network, and there's one of our principals who's sponsoring that, and is connecting her as a sponsor in with their CEO, and then she's going to connect them with sponsors of other employee networks as well, just to kind of get an understanding of the role that those networks can play, and particularly the role that the sponsor can play, how they can help generate support and promote sort of disability and wellbeing, and very much from a strengths-based perspective. So as Rinku talked about, people who are neurodiverse actually bringing great skills into the workplace. So our emerging network is saying, we want to take that approach that says people with a disability, actually, we don't want to really talk about it like that necessarily. We just want to talk about what makes people different, and then those differences that can come into the workplace and be really advantageous, and what's the position of strength that you can come from, rather than sort of talking about it from a deficit-based perspective. So we found them a really helpful resource, I guess, because there's a lot we don't know, and this gives us access to being able to ask some questions and having access to material on their member portal that can give us some guidance on what we should be doing and help us write some policies or some statements, etc.
Thank you for that insight. And both the Australian Network on Disability and Disability Employment Services might be a good place for you to start. Have a conversation about what does disability look like in the workplace? What does ability look like? What kind of support services your organisation would require to hire somebody with a disability, and see where the starting point is. You might actually already be in a position to look down that avenue.
And Drinker, we've got 4 job support workers as well. So that's another organisation that's really helpful. So we've had job support workers probably 6 or 7 years now. We've got 4 across 3 different offices at NAS, and they're employees with an intellectual disability. And we get them to, they're great long-term nurses that, as you say, are very committed to their roles. And we find opportunities for them within our organisation to help with office set up, with workshop setups, with cleaning, also photocopying, all sorts of the tasks, spreadsheeting, etc. And so we found that a really successful model, working with job support to ensure that we can create those opportunities and then keep those people employed for, as I said, 5+ years for most of them now with us.
Yeah, no, you're right. We're all increasingly learning, and we're all increasingly becoming aware of what possibilities are, what we already have in place and what we could have in place. So it's great to be exposed to 2 areas of diversity and inclusion that we don't often get to hear about. So thank you both, Stacey and Sally, for your insights. Now we have a few minutes left, and we'd love to welcome any questions from the audience that you might have of our speakers. I will start. Stacey, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how at Export Finance you have taken a considered approach to include employees in promoting diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and what are some of the wins you have had through that?
That's a great question, and I guess at Export Finance Australia, we have a very strong D&I focus. Like I've heard some of the other speakers mention today, it's ingrained in our culture, and we feel very strongly about it as a collective. And as a result of that, it's actually our people that drive that D&I conversation and help keep all our programs alive. I guess in saying that, from a HR point of view, though, we do try to nudge it along, and try to foster engagement through a few different ways. So awareness is one way. That includes education, discussion, being open to external stimuli, and really bringing our people along on a journey. Another way is obviously communication, so communicating in a timely and a consistent way with our people, so that we can keep that momentum going and everybody can get involved. Our CEO is actually really active in this sense as well, Swathi Dave, and she keeps the conversation going when it comes to inclusive practices. Another way is by inviting participation in a very cognizant way, and we do that through open dialogue in forums, having transparent practices, daily communication channels. So we have our inclusion committees, our D&I Council, and our RAP working group, which are both really important in terms of having that feedback loop and creating a forum and a space for conversation. Capability building is another way. So you invite participation in, but also get to educate at the same time. And we do that across all areas of D&I. D&I surveys and other informal ways of really capturing the information that you need and inviting people to have a say. So all these things sort of help us better navigate that change in context, but through the eyes of our people. Also, continued activation is important. So, that's about striving for normed behaviour, so that if you can see it, you can be it. And that's where I think recruitment and bringing in the right talent is really important. And it comes back to what Christy was saying about, having diverse thinking as part of your sort of selection criteria, not sort of bringing in the same person in the same mould. This has attributed to a rise in our cultural statistics and in our females in the workplace. I mean, our female representation at the exec now stands at 43%, which is just amazing. Accountability is another area. So I guess strong governance processes help reiterate that shared sense of responsibility across all the pillars, where our people really drive, progress and the change component. And then I guess finally celebration, because at the end of the day, that's also an important piece of inclusion, celebrating in an active but also in a genuine way. So we have a long list of events that we celebrate, International Women's Day, like you mentioned before, but NAIDOC Week, National Reconciliation Week, White Ribbon Day, WRK Day, Wear It Purple Day, I could go on, but, they're really important for our organisation. And I guess in the current climate, a sense of belonging, like you said at the beginning, Zrinka, is really important for a happy and a healthy workforce. And thankfully, our emphasis on inclusion creates that foundation from which our people can grow, they can thrive, and they can really work towards our purpose.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Sally, similar question for you at NOUS. Are you able to describe some of the programs and initiatives you have in place to ensure that employees and leadership teams do get involved?
Yep, I think we've got quite a lot of things that I think about it, and a lot of them perhaps similar to Stacey. If I summarise them, we did do a lot of work last year on an EDI plan, an equity, diversity and inclusion plan, and that's brought a lot of visibility and a lot of energy to the conversation around the organisation. So I think that visibility is really important. We worked on that plan. We consulted with lots of our employees around that, and we provided the kind of launch and the update on that at what we call our NOUS Days, which is a whole of NOUS. The whole company gets together, so 500 odd people. Lots of attention from that. It's done lots to promote EDI and get the conversation happening. Off the back of that, some of the actions we had the Diversity Council of Inclusion, Diversity Council of Australia Inclusion at Work survey. So we sent that out to all of our employees, and as a result, we've also now been recognised as an inclusive employer. We've seen our inclusion scores in our climate survey that we do monthly. We've seen those go from just over 3 to sort of 3.7 in the space of probably 8 or 9 months, and the rating scale is 3 is kind of most of the time, and I think sort of 4 is almost all the time. So that rating of 3.7 saying that almost all of the time people feel that it's a very inclusive workplace. I think employee networks are a really big part of it too. So we have a number of employee networks. They're always from the ground up. We don't ask for them. They are representative and reflective of how NASs are feeling and how they want to come together. So we have multicultural NAS. We've just got the new one that's being established around disability and wellbeing. We have a women's network. We have Christians with NAS, and we have NAS Proud, which was our first employee network quite a few years ago that was established. So I think the visibility of those networks for employees, candidates joining, but employees coming in, having a community that they can work with. And then we draw on them, to be honest, because one of our challenges is time and resources. And so we draw on those networks. They've got lots of ideas, lots of energy, and they help us to celebrate some of the days and the events, but also to put together, if we need a transitioning policy, for example, that we need some help with, we can get NAS Proud to help us work on what we need to have in that. So I think all of those sorts of things. We participated in ABCN, Australian Business Community Network. It's an organisation that provides mentoring and development opportunities for school children, secondary school from disadvantaged socio-economic backgrounds, and we're part of that program. So we get lots of our employees involved in providing mentoring and training through those programs. So it's just sort of, a whole variety of things that provide a lot of visibility to get people involved.
Yeah, and it is important to leverage off the whole team, because that
Absolutely.
does definitely
It's not a
increase
people team.
That's it.
Sort of responsibility. It's about everyone understanding and believing in the importance of this and being part of it.
Yeah. There is a question from Michelle Thompson. It is for me. When will the D&I report be circulated tomorrow? We want to add some of the insights that came out of the chat today, so we will make sure we circulate it to everyone who attended tomorrow. And one last question, because of course, again, we have gone over time. As a business who is starting to actively improve D&I, where are some of the key places for us to start? Maybe just from the panel, a tip of, what was your starting point and what had the most traction?
I think get a conversation going. Ask, ask your employees what are the things that are really important to them.
Yeah. Also assess, where is your organisation, where does it need to go, and where are those gaps, what do you need? Go to the employees, ask them what kind of support you'd already offer and what additional support you could also offer in that space. Ask your team as well how represented they feel. Do they feel that the organisation represents everyone it should represent, or whether there could be an increased level of diversity there? I think it goes with a lot of improvements we make in organisations. The best place to start is to find out what it is that your team needs and use that as a building block, and it will definitely gain traction from the team to get involved as well and help you build on those programs. Thank you again to the panel for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and your insights. I think one of the best things about running the Best Places to Work study is that every company is so eager to share what they do, and they are really eager to learn and to continue improving and to continue being the leading organisations. Next month, we are looking at reward and recognition at the best organisations. Please join us for that. We will have a panel from Bluefin, Slingshot, Capital Partners, Jets Fitness, and The Works. Really looking forward to that. With the paper, we will share a registration link as well for that. So if you and your colleagues are interested, please come along. And thank you again to the panel. I really appreciate your time today, and to all the attendees as well.
Thanks, Rinka. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rinka. Bye.
Thank you.